It gives the opportunity to practice looking at the world in a different way than you might naturally do so. But it also really gives the opportunity to explore both internally who we might be, but also to try and create an image of what others might be or what we think others might
Welcome back to Shrinking It Down, Mental Health Made Simple. I'm Gene Beresin,
And I'm Khadijah Booth Watkins.
and we're two child and adolescent psychiatrists at the Clay Center for Young Healthy Minds at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And if you're a regular listener, you'll know I often reference the benefits of casually playing and role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons for healthy child development. Well, today we're going to explore role play through a more therapeutic lens.
Yeah, role play, pretend play is not a new concept. Kids have been doing it since the beginning of time. Well, I mean, I say kids, but we see kids, young and old, and we also see adults engaging in forms of role play through video games, using avatars, dressing up to attend conventions. But anyway, I digress. Today, to help us talk about this topic and join us in this conversation as we explore the role of role play in therapy, we have two special guests joining us, Terrence Dolan and John Corbett. Both are child and adolescent psychiatry fellows here at the MGH McLean training program. Welcome to the show.
be. Gene, Khadijah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us.
So, for those of you out there who may not know, um, these guys are both doctors. They,
Oh.
yeah, they're both doctors, and they both completed medical school and residency in general psychiatry, and they're now working to be even more specialized in child and adolescent psychiatry. So this is the Child and Adolescent Fellowship Training Program. We know that we need a lot more clinicians. Well, overall, we need a lot more child and adolescent psychiatrists, but especially like these two guys who are really passionate about child and adolescent psychiatry. So we're really pleased to have you on the show.
So before we spring into our conversation about role play and therapy, notice I use spring because the sun has finally shown up in Boston. But anyway,
After
maybe
the
you
after the eclipse, I mean, it
a-
can't.
a- after the eclipse and the nor'easter in April, by the way. Um, but maybe you guys can share a little bit about your background, what drew you to child psychiatry, and what interests about the topic that we're going to talk about today. Who wants to start?
Terrence, you can go first.
Sure. I think it's nice that it's spring outside. The sun came out only to go in hiding again very briefly. Um, what drew me to psychiatry is I've had a long interest in becoming a child and adolescent psychiatrist. It's been a lifelong dream of mine. Had some, I think, really meaningful experiences during my own adolescence that really directed me in this and moved me in this direction. It's been every experience in the field has been deeply rewarding. It's something I feel really passionately about. I'm really excited about just being in this program, learning and being able to give back. Um, Regarding role-playing games, I started playing role-playing games, goodness, maybe I was on stage in musicals when I was in the third grade, but that ultimately became formal role-playing games in high school when I joined a Dungeons and Dragons group and never stopped playing.
John, what about you?
Yeah, so in terms of psychiatry, I got drawn into psychiatry during my medical school. We had a rotation in our third year when we go off to different hospitals and be on different services. And I remember the first week in psychiatry and then calling my mom and being like, "This is so cool. I get to like talk to somebody about what they're feeling." And like I was so enamored with it. And my mom was kind of surprised. But I kind of that interest grew and grew, and I eventually applied for psychiatry and did my training at Dartmouth for general adult training. Um, and then one of the things that fascinates me about psychiatry as a field is that it's very narrative based, that we tend to think about a person as a whole person and how they interact with the world around them, and that everyone kind of has their own story that they're developing in their head as they're moving about life, and so we get to help somebody kind of think about their story and where they want it to go. Um, so in terms of role-playing games, I remember pretty vividly in high school my friend was running a Dungeons and Dragons game and invited my brother and I, And at the time, I don't think Dungeons and Dragons was all that popular. And I remember asking my brother, "Are we this nerdy?" Like, kind of just like wondering ourselves, "Are we going to do this?" And we did it, and it was the best decision we ever made as a pair. And it was so much fun, and I continued doing role-playing games ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. And we're so lucky to have you training here with us. It's a privilege and have you here on the podcast today. Um, so maybe we could start off with defining what role play means in the context of therapy. I mean, what does that exactly mean?
Think it can mean a lot of different things. I think an aspect, like we think about role playing in a lot of different areas. I think we could think about it like acting, like if someone was going to be adopting a persona to then portray something on television or in a musical or in a play. So that we can consider that to be role playing. We can consider role playing to be like when somebody is wanting to have a conversation with another person about a situation and adopting a different role, like it be used in a conversational sort of way. Um, uh, and then we also can use it. I mean, I know we're going to be talking a little bit more about this coming up too. In different therapy modalities, like family therapy, there are certain ways in which couples can adopt different roles and then role play together about a situation they're experiencing. Yeah, that's some of the things I'm thinking about at the moment.
So, in terms of therapy, I mean, these are all different models, and as you say, we'll come to each of them in a little bit. But could you clarify, how is role playing, you know, capturing a different person's point of view for clarification, say in a conflict, or walking in their other shoes, like empathically to kind of get it right and to empathize with them, to kind of like feel their feelings, things like that. I mean, so are those the kinds of therapeutic ways that role playing helps people understand themselves and each other?
Broadly, yes. I think role playing in general, I think is one of those ideas that it's hard to identify specifically, but you know it when you see it. But a core component of it would be to be able to step outside of oneself and then temporarily do something different, try something on. In a simple sense, almost like trying on clothes for size, stepping in a mirror and seeing how something looks different. So it gives the opportunity to practice empathy. It gives the opportunity to practice looking at the world in a different way than you might naturally do so. But it also really gives the opportunity to explore both internally who we might be, but also to try and create an image of what others might be or what we think others might be.
No, I was just going to say, so it generates both understanding of yourself and understanding of somebody else in a deeper way.
Absolutely.
I love the analogy of kind of like trying on clothes for size or even style for that matter, and the idea of kids being able to kind of be introspective, try things on, and as they develop their own kind of sense of identity, what they like and they don't like, and how this also changes over time, like what they may have felt like or enjoyed or personified in middle school might be different in high school, which also might be different in college. So I love that idea about just kind of trying on and seeing how things fit and sits with you, because it could be a lot of fun, but it is actually a productive act.
Yeah, and the other thing is that kids at all ages um, want to be seen and want to be known for whom they are. I mean, adolescence is typically the period of time where young people are working on their identities, and it's a way of kind of expressing yourself, isn't it?
Feel like we naturally kind of do that. Like I think one of the big like things I think about with in high school is when you have a certain band that you like or a certain style of clothes that you like that may persist for about a month or two, sometimes longer. But then sometimes it's dropped like a bad habit and then it goes on to something else. That essentially is a way that we're kind of role playing as well. Like we're trying on a different kind of thing on for size and then seeing if we like it, seeing what parts we like, what parts we don't, the friend groups that we make through the things that we're trying on. And then sometimes we change. And so that kind of putting things on, taking things off is something that naturally kind of continues as we grow older.
So it's kind of like experimentation. We're experimenting with different ways of being and then finding out what seems to be the right combination for us.
Right. Because how would you know if you haven't tried it on?
Part of what makes this such a great way to, I think, engage is that it's fun, and it really gives us an opportunity to connect with each other. It's different ways of seeing how we might interact. And then some of them will be positive and rewarding, and some of them may not work so well. And it's a great learning experience.
And then
Let's
when things don't work, they say, well, I guess, since you're listening to older heavy metal or death metal, that you're into kind of like negativity and destruction and like Ozzy Osbourne chopping off chickens' heads and things like that. And then the
oh
kids
god,
say,
let's keep it right. Let's keep it G. Let's keep it G. Rated G.
but let's say let's say the parent wants to try to understand like why are they doing that?
Think a lot of parents, like if we take the example of somebody listening to like death metal or wearing like more goth clothing, like sometimes parents I think worry that their kid is going to start doing things that may negatively impact their health, like start using drugs or hanging out with friends that may be bad influences. And I think that certainly there may be situations where someone is listening to those bands and trying on those clothes, and then does do things that negatively impact their health, but not always. And I think that as long as there's like open communication about, hey, like I'm okay with you like engaging in these sorts of interests that you have, just make sure you're doing it safely. I think as long as there's like an open communication and dialogue, I think it's normal and natural for kids to be kind of doing this kind of exploration.
And I think hmm, you hit the nail on the head with the idea of open communication because it's about having conversations with your kids. It's about not jumping to conclusions or assumptions and asking questions. Like I've noticed, you change your style because we don't want to encourage parents to ignore changes because we always say, what are some potential signs that your child might be struggling and it's major changes in their behavior, their functioning, even their friend group. And so we want to encourage a conversation about these changes as opposed to jumping to conclusions and assumptions. So, but I think this is a great segue to dig a little deeper about how we do engage in role play in the therapeutic kind of realm and how do we do it and make it successful. For example, is it a structured approach? Is it more of a casual approach? I think about a podcast that we had earlier where we talked about exposure therapy to help kids with phobias. Is role play kind of more of a structured exposure like is role play more structured like CBT or is it more loose and flexible?
Yeah, that I think so as a general kind of thing for role playing, I think it does kind of depend on the therapy modality that we're using. Like that there's a type of family therapy. I remember actually Anne Michelle gave me an article while I was interviewing here for fellowship, and it was this very structured way of doing role playing where a one partner essentially writes a script about a situation when there was a conflict. And then they have the other partner kind of say verbatim what they interpreted the situation of what that person said. And then they essentially keep repeating it until it's exactly perfect to what the person had gotten on their script. And then the other person does the same thing. They describe a situation and then have a script and then they get it repeated until it's exactly right. Then each person recalls a situation in the past where it was a similar situation, but the other partner got it right, quote unquote. And then each person then also brings up another script from something in their past, like related to like a family member or like their parents or a friend when they were growing up, related with a similar kind of theme, and then has the other person role play that another person. like from that memory. So that's a very structured way of doing like kind of role play within the family therapy setting. There are times then when it's also just more organic. Like we take a situation, like let's say a family comes in and then they describe an argument that happened last week. It's like, okay, well, let's kind of replay out the argument right now and then kind of see how each person remembers the situation. And sometimes it's just clarifying like what each person said and then how each person interpreted it. Because I think a lot of the root of family discord is based on miscommunication. Like jumping to conclusions, like all the ways in which our brains kind of make links to things. So yeah, just those are a couple examples I can think of.
And what's the role of the therapist? When they're role playing it out, is there an active role that the therapist will play? So say, well, let's take a time out here and say,
Mhm.
and see what's going on, and are they getting it right? And so, what do you do?
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of the beauty of role play is that it's because in a therapy setting it's a safe space and it is a place to kind of explore the interactions that we have with other people and the ways we think about ourselves. And so when we're doing role playing, we can take a time out like, oh, that seems like a really impactful thing that just was said or that happened. Let's explore that. Like, what did you feel like when that was said? And then being able to take that pause, because when families are interacting together, it can be hard sometimes to take that pause and really think about how each person is interpreting a situation. And that's kind of the nice thing about how we can use it in family therapy work.
What about in play therapy when you're one-on-one with the kid? What would role play look like in that kind of setting? Would it be, again, kind of depending on the goals that you have with the child? So it may be flexible, maybe structured, maybe not structured, but how does it look individually?
Well, for play therapy, that I think entirely depends on the age of the child that we're playing with. In many of our younger children, play is how our patients communicate with us. So if we're playing a game, we might be playing the teacher game, in which case a child assumes the role of the teacher and they may give the therapist different tasks to do. And if the tasks seem impossible for the therapist to do, that might be a communication of I'm in school and I feel the tasks that my teacher gives me feel impossible. It's a way to connect, but it's a way to communicate and it's a way to practice and work through. Whereas the therapist in that situation can now model, ah, I wasn't able to do this task and it's okay. And I'm still good. And that, in that sense, watching and witnessing a trusted adult work through challenging and difficult experiences by playing it out in a safe way can be really meaningful for a young child.
So you switch roles. You could switch roles with the kid in the session. Is that what?
Absolutely. It's
So
all about flexibility depending on what's happening in the play.
so you guys are both role playing.
Absolutely. Another way to do this is having school age children maybe practicing how they might respond to schoolyard bullying. To say, well, what would happen if this other student came up to you and said ABC? The first option might be, well, I'm going to slug them in the face. Okay, we could do this. What are our other options? Let's pause, let's reverse it, let's try again. And in that way, we can think about different approaches for problem solving. But most importantly, the therapist allows the child to brainstorm it out, to practice their own conflict resolution and their own problem solving skills, to build those skills. It doesn't quite work as well if the therapist just gives the answer.
Is it a buzzword? Gina's going to jump in on conflict resolution. Go, Gene.
Well, conflict is well.
I saw his face light up.
Yes. No, I actually was going to log in on
Mm.
on cognitive behavior therapy because I think that's just for the folks out there. The model is, there's a trigger. Let's say a kid's bullied, and then the thought is, oh, I'm worst person in the world. This bully is actually right. And then there's an emotion, which might be sadness or avoidance or anger. And then there's a behavior, which is running away, let's say. And what the whole model is, you work on thoughts that are exaggerated, distorted, or at most catastrophic. And imagine a devil on one shoulder and an angel on another. And the devil says, something like, you're just a rotten, no good kid. And you know that nobody likes you. Then the angel says, what do you mean? I'm nice, I'm friendly, I don't hurt anybody, I don't do what you're doing. Is that the kind of thing that you might role play out with another kid and actually play devil and angel with them as kind of like taking on two roles and then maybe switching those roles or what?
I think it highlights that whenever like if there is a situation where there's a lot of emotional turmoil and there's a decision that didn't go the way that the kid was hoping for, sometimes like there are usually very good reasons that someone makes the decision that they do. Like we all base our decisions off of previous information. And sometimes with that information, it just we didn't have enough to know that this decision wouldn't be great. And so I think by kind of taking a situation, then looking, okay, what were the things that were prompting that decision? What were the things that, like the angel, what was the angel saying that was influencing the decision? And then what are the things like following the situation that the devil kind of then says about it? Like, oh, because this didn't go your way, you're a label of some kind, like you're a bad person. Um, but then in reality, when we actually kind of look at the beginning of the decision, that may not be the case. Like I think we try to categorize like labels for ourselves in order to kind of make it simpler for us to think about ourselves. Like that it's hard to kind of have a duality, like that we're kind of all multifaceted people. Sometimes our brain makes conclusions as like labeling ourselves when that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, I teach that to most of my patients, not all of them. I teach them a whole bunch of things, but one of the things they always say is that when they get caught up in something like low self-esteem or I just can't do this or nobody's going to like me or it's just something like extremely usually negative. Um, and then they'll say, well, the devil always wins when I do it. And then so what I say is, all right, let's role play this. What do you want to be, the devil or the angel? And then we actually spend it's no more than like 10 minutes. I want them to do like 10 minutes every day. But oftentimes they get stuck because their belief system, I mean, what Beck said is that negative thoughts are often about negative beliefs or distorted or exaggerated beliefs about the past, present, or future, and they influence our emotions. And so what you really want to do, and there's probably a grain of truth to it. Okay, so let's say the kid has ADHD and they interrupt a lot, and that's annoying. And then the devil is saying, you always interrupt, you're just so full of yourself, like why can't you just like go away, and just shut up? And then the angel is going to say, well, okay, I can try harder, but sometimes I do have some pretty good things to say. Maybe we can kind of work something out where you can tell me to just zip it or something. And then the devil says, you'll never zip it. You'll never zip it. Whenever we try to do that, you just get worse. And the angel says, well, I could really work on this. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things that sometimes it takes another person to be able to argue it down because the individual, the kid himself or herself, themselves, um, gets stuck with the negative thoughts and beliefs. Do you find that?
Yeah, like sometimes a really useful exercise with a kid is if they're having like some sort of negative belief about themselves, or uh they have this feeling about themselves that's very negative, like you can say, hey, would you say that to your best friend? Like, would you say that they're worthless or that they're not lovable? Well, no. Like they usually will be able to say, like, no, I think this person is annoying for these reasons. But then why are you saying that about yourself? Like
So then do you play the best friend and say, let's play this out?
you could. Yeah, like what would your best friend say to you in this situation? Like you can adopt the best friend, or they can adopt the best friend and you adopt them. Like you can kind of play with it a little bit.
Or even the idea of thinking about, you know, how would you think it would make your best friend feel to think that they're dumb or stupid, and like helping them to understand the connection of, our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior, I think is helpful to help motivate and engage them into the therapy. This is why we do the CBT. This is why we try to challenge these negative thoughts, because it does impact how we feel and how we behave. So I think it could also help with the understanding. And the idea of also using real life scenarios to help them with their communication skills, to help them with their ability to be able to kind of navigate some of these difficult social situations and advocate for themselves or negotiate, can be really helpful and useful social skills that a lot of kids struggle with. And whether you role play in the terms of dress up or whether you just kind of assume someone else's kind of role, if you will, it can be incredibly helpful and can really serve to engage kids who maybe would not otherwise be engaged.
And role play
So
can be used to work through different challenges depending on what we're looking to do. If we're school age, maybe we're looking to build confidence in the things that we'd like to achieve. We really believe that we are the things that we do at that age. So getting in the practice of doing really fun things, and building that confidence of accomplishing tasks through role play can be wonderful. I think that's part of the reason why so many school age children like Minecraft and Roblox. These are games in which they can step into a different role and get a lot of construction. And older adolescents might be exploring their identity. So a lot of these role-playing games involve some kind of character creation.
yeah.
And they get the opportunity to dress up that character and say, and pour a little bit of themselves into that character.
Well, my 3-year-old granddaughter, one of my grandkids, is dressed up either as Moana or as Anna. And, they're both, incredible heroines. And usually what she'll do is she'll set up a situation where the heroine kind of like is victorious and does something terrific and special. And then she wants me to be kind of like the bad guy or, so that she can win. But I mean, even in preschool kids, who are doing it in a rudimentary way, especially with costumes.
I think it's also interesting to see how the characters change. Like I think also about my son and when he is on games and online or even his avatar, it used to be this colorful character, was always muscular. The character still is always muscular, but maybe would have this crazy hair, red, green, orange, and it would just be so extravagant. And now I see his characters now look more, closer to him. Still very muscular, which he's a very fit kid, but he's still thin. But it's interesting to see how it changes. It's like he used to be almost like, not a monster, but always was a nice looking avatar, but it was always like a character. Now his avatars look more like, a
Well,
human.
does he play the Hulk? I mean, the Hulk would be a good one.
He used to love the Hulk. He used to watch the old Hulk show series. Like he'd watch the old ones where you could see the green come off when he was actually a man, kind of sort of black and white looked like.
So
So he's
comic books actually, are really key for this. I mean, don't you think they're, look at Batman. I mean, Batman, is kind of this rich elite guy who's just like turns into this different persona. So this transformative, means of like playing something else. It's very common in certainly in comic books, but also in a lot of films.
So is there anything else you think parents or teachers or any adult might want to know about using play as a therapeutic tool? Like anything that we haven't covered that we probably should cover? Because we did cover a lot, but maybe we missed something.
I think, like, on that kind of topic, role playing in and of itself is very playful. That you, it can be kind of fun to try on different roles for size, and I think that I think if a parent were going to be using role playing with their kid, sometimes if they notice their kid is having a bad day, or they had a situation that didn't go their way, like sometimes like starting a conversation saying, "Hey, it seems like you're really upset. Do you want to talk about it?" And then obviously kids don't always want to talk about it initially, then they might want to talk about it later. But I think then if there's an opportunity to have a conversation about a situation that didn't go very well for them, like being able to say, hey, do you want me to kind of play the other person? You tell me what to say, what was said to you, or maybe I can be you and you can say what the other person was saying to you. Like allowing for kind of like almost like creating a mini play of what had happened. So that way I think it helps one, the kid kind of relook at it from a different perspective, but also the parent to better understand what had happened too. Because I know there are times where I'm talking with a kid and I kind of ask them like, hey, can you give me a play-by-play of this specific situation? And then we kind of start talking it out. And then I realized something very specific about what had happened that I wasn't clued into before. So I think that's a way that parents could use it.
Right?
I think one of the most important aspects when thinking about role play is the crucial aspect of the safetiness of this. It needs to be a safe space in order for role play to happen. The metaphor that comes to my mind is that of an Etch-a-Sketch board, where we can do all kinds of interesting things on the Etch-a-Sketch board for role play. But if we don't have the option just to shake it up and then try again, then it will be a lot harder to engage in a lot of that role playing, a lot of that exploration that can allow to development of these skills. If a father and their child are practicing and interviewing skills for a potential job interview that's coming up for an adolescent, if the parent is not able to hold the mistakes and then express what mistakes or say, I might have expressed myself, I may have described myself differently. This is how I might try to do it. As the way in which we communicate can either open up more opportunities for role play and allow for more role play to happen, or it can shut it down. One of the big rules in improvisation is yes and, not no but. And that language goes a long way in allowing more opportunities and more ways for children to learn from experience.
And I think to make it even more simpler, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is the idea of when you're role playing or playing in general with your kids, it's really important to keep keep it a judgment-free zone. And so we talk about this as we're having conversations with our kids and while we're playing with our kids, because to your point, when the kids sense judgment and harsh criticism, it's the quickest way to shut down any form of communication or play. And so you want to be mindful of the words you choose, the words you say, the tone of your voice, and your body language. Like, why did you choose to wear X, Y, and Z? That sounds very judgmental and critical. Help me think about, help me understand what your outfit's about. Is a very different way than saying, why did you choose to wear pink shoes and purple socks, whatever it is. But I think the judgment is critical because it's important that we keep them creative and keep them wanting to share. And also making sure that we're modeling. And as a parent, if things come out, like you said, that maybe are upsetting or disturbing, is really important for you to get a hold of your own emotions, get a hold of your own thoughts and feelings before you engage and respond. So if you, again, think that maybe they did something that wasn't great or that you would have done differently, think about how you would communicate that to them in a way that's constructive and productive.
As we always say, it's always good to start young. So if we start even in preschool and continue that kind of ethos, that kind of atmosphere, that kind of style that you were just describing, Khadijah, as the kids grow up and develop, I think it keeps the home, a safe place and an expectation that this is okay.
And loosen up and have fun. That's what I would also say.
One of the analogies I'm thinking of, I don't remember where I heard this, but I thought it was pretty meaningful that all of us, each as humans, are learning how to bake a human from scratch, that we're all kind of trying to figure out our place in the world and how we want to present. And I think when, when I'm seeing kids and kind of thinking about my own childhood and the ways that I was kind of made mistakes, figured things out, that, if a kid is like, let's take that example of dressing very differently, going to school, and maybe something that's not quite appropriate, like, I think it could be easy for adults to forget, like when they were in high school, like if they wore a really crazy outfit one day to just try it on for size, that I think it's kind of a normal thing for kids to do every now and again. So I think being able to kind of take a curious and kind of open perspective and understanding it a bit more, rather than something that's a bit more harsh, critical, judgmental, can be really helpful.
Well, this was awesome. Jean, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. So let's talk about our own favorite games. Khadijah, do you have a favorite game?
So while I said don't forget to have fun and loosen up, I'm not a traditional like loose person. So I don't play a lot of games, but the game that I do really love to play with my kids or in my family, we do this around holidays, is Mario Kart. And so I love to pick my character, pick my fast car. And so this is what I do, loosen up and have fun. So I love Mario Kart. We love Monopoly as well. It gets a little bit competitive. And so I have to remind myself it's just a game and model, good behavior and be, um, use my good communication skills. So those would be my two, but I think my favorite is Mario Kart. How about you, Gene?
Well, the reason I like kind of role play games is that I don't like thinking games. I don't like games where you have to think, because I think all the time. So charades is fun, and that's role playing, where you're kind of like people are guessing who you are. Um, Actually, my favorite game is playing frisbee with my dog. So how about you, John? What do you like?
I think one of my fondest memories growing up that we would do these family trips over to Michigan, and the only way to get four kids in a car for 12 hours of driving to be mostly still was that we had a little seat, like one of those backlit TVs sitting in the stand, and my brothers and I would all play like Super Smash Brothers.
Oh,
That
that's a good
kind of
one.
that was fun. I'm glad we didn't get in an accident because someone would have gotten brained by a TV, but that would have been bad. But a lot of video games growing up with my brothers. And currently, I'm running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that's horror based, about vampires and stuff. So that's been kind of fun.
What
And
about you,
Terrence?
Terrence?
Yeah, how about you?
So Dungeons and Dragons is by far my favorite role-playing game. Um, I've got a group going since high school that is still going to this day. We play online. Um, so I'm still gaming in that group. And it's been a lot of fun to have different members join us and folks kind of go off and branch off and start their own. So that Dungeons and Dragons continues to be my favorite. Another that I continue to return to is a video game. It's like a video game role playing game where we can create a character, and it's a Star Wars game, so it's lots of fun. It's called the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, where you get to decide whether you're going to be a Jedi or a Sith Lord, and you get to pick what special force powers and what the color of your lightsaber is going to be, and it's lots and lots of fun to play.
So we have to wrap up. So Terrence and John, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been great to have you on, and this has really been cool and fun to talk about. And for those of you at home, we hope that our conversation will help you have yours. I'm Gene Beresin.
And I'm Khadijah Booth Watkins. Until next time.
Hey, did I nail the Hulk or what?
My son used to watch the old original Hulk, and I was like, at
Me
one point,
too.
Is
It's a
something
good
wrong with him?
show.
He was little. I was like, how
That
did you
was-
even find the original Hulk? He
That-
was so little then.
Dr. David Banner, physician, scientist, searching for a way to tap into the hidden strengths that all humans have.